The story begins in a work office. Our protagonist works at the advertising department of the Grand Glory Company. Right away, we see that he is the type of person who works more than he can handle. His boss comes and starts saying that the company is going through a hard time, so a lot of people are being fired, so he should work more, sort of threatening him, you know? He then gives a list of potential clients for him to call them one by one, and that tomorrow he needs to show the results. So we can clearly see that his boss is a big asshole. So our protagonist keeps working even though he is really tired, until something weird happened. Everything starts losing their focus and becomes pixelated. A mysterious figure appears on the protagonist's monitor. At first, he is confused if what he is seeing is real or not, but one of his co-workers notices that something is wrong and calls him. That's when we discover that his name is actually Howard. At first, he doesn't respond, but then returns to normal and says that he's all right. Just his vision got a bit blurry for a moment. His co-worker tells him to take some time off and relax, and reminds him that today, their boss would take everyone to a company dinner, which might seem great for us watching, but the protagonist thinks it is bullshit, since at the end, everyone would have to split the bill, and since he doesn't earn much money, for him it wasn't worth the trip. His co-worker, noticing that Howard wouldn't want to go, probably because of the money, offers to lend him $20 so he can go. That guy is a real bruh. He says that they actually have no choice but to go, since the new director would be announced that night, and speaking of her name is Sabrina Luo. She came by the office with style, making all the men lose their shit just by looking at her. Our protagonist clearly knows that she is too much for him. Some hours later, everyone is happy at the dinner. They are all drinking and smiling when suddenly the protagonist starts having the same thing he had at the office, but this time it is way worse. His iris starts glowing, and he hears a loud buzz when suddenly his nerve system was all connected to some kind of virtual reality that only he could see. That same weird image was projected above him, while the other people near him were unable to see it. Then a robotic voice starts talking.
Of course they can't see it. The limited Universal Star makes extra effort to bring to his clients the best possible experience, helping them reach memorable improvements using virtual reality.
Right away, the protagonist gets worried, wondering what this thing has to do with him. Since he never bought anything related to virtual reality, he doesn't even have money for that. And as if it could read his thoughts, the weird robot responds, "Based on big databases and calculations, you're the perfect candidate for our dream test. You'll be the test candidate for our dreamland, where you can have many life experiences. Think of that as a greater version of a VR game. In other words, isekai." Funny how when the robot says that, he shows an image of the soldier from Counter-Strike and Boruto's teacher, Shino. Howard, as a good old shithead protagonist, tells the robot to stop that because he would need to work tomorrow and didn't have time for those things. Then the robot says that this system can take a copy of any real-life person to the dreamland, and that he could decide what would happen with his life. Then the robot asks him the big question, if he wouldn't want to live his life as a different person. But before our protagonist can give an answer, the new director enters the room alongside their boss. And what a director, huh? He formally introduces her to everyone there, one by one. He introduces her to a guy that is known by everyone for constantly flattering the boss all the time and on everything he does. This guy, who by the way is so drunk that he keeps staring at the women's boobs. The boss keeps presenting every worker to her, but simply ignores our protagonist. The woman obviously notices that and asks about him. The protagonist starts shaking trying to talk to her, and as he was about to say his name, his boss interrupts him and says that he is a nobody. His abilities are mediocre and that he basically has no communication capabilities, basically destroying the man. But we see that these are all lies, and for some reason, this fat son of a bitch just doesn't like the protagonist, because contrary to the other workers, he never tried to flatter him, and because of that, he tries to screw with the protagonist in every way he could. The woman doesn't seem to care and just greets everyone. The story follows and everyone is going home. The dinner is over and tomorrow everyone has to work again. Our protagonist Howard is a bit stressed out because he thought if he worked hard, he would be recognized at some point, but that didn't happen. His partner tries to cheer him up, saying that if he wants to grow, he doesn't have a choice but to fawn over the boss. Right after that, we see a flashback of this guy in his school years when he was one of the leaders of the students' movement against the system, the complete opposite of who he is now. The man simply sold himself to the system. After that, we see the boss trying to flirt with the with the director, saying that she doesn't need to waste her time with these insignificant workers, but she doesn't seem to care for what he's saying, just telling him that she knows what she's doing, while our protagonist overhears the conversation. The boss notices that the protagonist was listening and starts talking indirectly to him, saying that if someone hasn't realized yet what he wants to do, that person should be fired. Then something happens. Those words must have been the end of the line for Howard. He's angry because all his hard work and and dedication were worthless. Even if is outside or inside his workplace, he still suffers discrimination. That's enough for him. He was determined to leave his job tomorrow, but until then, he should calm down his anger. So he tells the robot to take a copy of the director, and his boss to the Dreamland.
Instructions error. The system can only scan one person at Time. Base it on the request. The system determines that the target to be scanned is the Sabrina Luo.
Howard was confused.
Scanning completed. Character created.
The story follows, and the protagonist goes back to his apartment, where he asks the robot why he didn't tell him that the system could only scan one person at a time, because he wasn't prepared for that.
The system has detected a huge rise of dopamine in your brain. In conclusion, you're loving it.
Howard becomes embarrassed by having the truth thrown at his face, saying that in fact it would be cool to have an NPC of a hot woman being his servant at the game. I mean, he isn't wrong. The robot says that the Dreamland system would be activated at midnight, and until then, he should find a safe place to sleep. The protagonist says that's fine, but he's also feeling too anxious to fall asleep. The robots say that this won't be a problem, because they obviously already predicted that situation, and that the system would interfere with the activation of his ascending reticular activating system. In other words, the part of his brain responsible for his sleep, making him fall asleep. Simple as that. Then the process starts. Howard, getting more and more nervous, starts feeling everything spinning, and his heart beating faster, until suddenly he slept like a baby, just for almost immediately waking up, in a way that all of us would want to be awakened someday, with a half-naked 2D character above him, saying, "So we finally met." The woman quickly introduces herself as being the AI administrator of the Dreamland, and her name is AI-63. The protagonist seems a bit confused. She explains to him about the shops and credit systems, where he can buy stuff that will be useful in the future, like a military knife costing 2 credits, and 100-ton truck that costs 40 credits, a temperature-controlling shirt and package of compressed food, and a battery with infinite energy that costs 200 points of credit. At first, we don't notice the value of these items, right? But I can assure you that each one of those things is extremely valuable for the place where he is heading to. She also explains that for every challenge he completes, he would gain some credit points and blah blah blah. The same old stuff we're already seen in others isekai. The protagonist thanks her for the explanation and asks about the NPCs, if there is anyone that is strong for him to use. The AI then tells him that for 10,000 points she would be at his service, which the protagonist thinks is a steal. Then she warns him that the Dreamland is being activated, and if he doesn't have any other question, then shit is about to get serious right now. A portal that leads directly to the apocalyptic world appears, and when our protagonist approaches it to go to another world, so, he wakes up. He looks around, trying to see if what he just lived was real or not, then realizing he's at home and nothing changed. He was never an expert in technology, but even he should know that it is impossible to create a new world out of nothing, so he decides to just take a bath and prepare for work. After getting to his bathroom, he notices that the power is off, which is intriguing. He goes down the stairs of his apartment like normal, not noticing anything different, until he comes out of the door and notices that he is now alone, literally alone. There was no one nearby, and anywhere. He then hears a weird buzz, and as he looks up, he sees a huge plane falling above him, and believe it or not, exploding right in front of him. And you might be wondering, so he died? That's how the story ends? And well, obviously not. In fact, thanks to the Kishimoto no Jutsu, he was able to hide behind a car just in time.
The Dreamlands Simulator. Apocalypse Survival just started. What are you going to do to survive now that everyone in the world has disappeared? Difficulty level is 0. You have 180 days to survive.
Wait, did you say 180 days? But before he was able to say anything else, Howard notices a sound of liquid dropping coming from the car next to him. When he comes down to see what it was, a puddle of gasoline forms near him. Once again, using his Kishimoto no Jutsu, he was able to escape alive from a point-blank explosion while screaming, "Are you fucking kidding me?" The story goes on, and our protagonists now have recovered from the initial shock of arriving at this new world. He started to think about his situation more logically. He writes down his needs in his book, so he can have a better understanding of what would be his priorities there. 180 days might look like a lot of time, but if I can get a lot of supplies, I might be able to survive. I can use those 180 days to think about what my life will be after I resign. Maybe I can even have some fun. And that's what he did. Our protagonist went to some some clothing stores to find the best drip for the apocalypse, borrowed some jewels, drank the most expensive drinks, because at the end of the day, he was the only person in the world, right? After remembering that, he also remembered that the robot made a copy of that of his company's director. He started talking on the radio of a police car, trying to contact the server's GM, asking about the woman's copy. He heard a sound coming from behind, and instantly turns around, just to see that it was a doggy, which for him made sense. Since every other human disappeared, the animals can run freely. He started thinking that the AI tricked him to play this game, and there would be no woman. He heard another animal, but this time it was nothing less than a freaking tiger. The protagonist almost pisses himself after the tiger jumped towards him, but instead of being ripped and eaten alive, he was kindly licked by the tiger. You might be wondering again, oh hey look, another Kishimoto no Jutsu, but this time there's actually a good reason for that. The protagonist knew that tiger, he was actually friendly to humans. In fact, a lot of tourists used to take pictures with him. So, okay, we'll let it pass this time. 7 days have gone by since our hero started living alone in a post-apocalyptic world, and the challenge was getting even tougher than he could imagine. The water in the taps had run out, and the only way to get more was from the bottles in the market. Without power to keep the refrigerator, the meat and vegetables started to rot, and now there were worms everywhere. Our protagonist was living by eating cookies lately, but he didn't know how much time his body could keep up with the lack of vitamins. Luckily, in one of his hunts for food, he found an old restaurant that had a diesel generator inside, which in a post-apocalyptic world, my friends, is pure gold. And to get even better, there was still some consumable meat in the freezer. Considering his findings, he decided to make that restaurant his new shelter from now on. During the day, he went out trying to get most of the supplies he could. During night, he plowed land to grow some veggies, using the rotten meat as a fertilizer. And then the days went by. Day 31. Howard drove through the surrounding areas, wondering what he would do today. His co-worker told him to search for a shop that sells some seeds, that it was gross to pick seeds from rotten vegetables. That was obviously an illusion created in his head, and Howard knew that. That's why he said he had a better idea, that he would take this hands off the wheel, and then it wouldn't take long before the car hit something and he would be killed. And when he wakes up, everything would be back to normal. His illusionary co-worker tells Howard to cheer up, since the garlic he had planted was finally sprouting, but he responds saying that this has nothing to do with his vegetables, that the entire city is looking like a dump with flies everywhere, and when he sleeps it feels like there's worms walking through his body. During the night he can't see anything, is suffocating like the whole world has abandoned him. That's it guys, our protagonist just gone completely nuts. His co-worker gives him a speech telling him to not give up, for him to wake up to reality, that he is the one playing the game, and not the game playing him. While he listens to his co-worker, something jumps out in front of his car, forcing him to brake suddenly. Another car appears in front of him, and yes, it is the company's director. She crashes her car, and the airbags are deployed. The car's airbags okay, not hers. After the crash, the woman passes out. But when she wakes up, she was already in another place. She notices that someone made a band-aid on her face, and she was wearing male clothes for some reason. Then she leaves the room and notices that she's in some kind of restaurant, and there is a diesel generator on, and there was also some fresh food on the table. She keeps searching for what's going on when she finds our protagonist shaving his beard, because after 30 days completely alone, bro, with a woman like that hanging around, he might as well let everything ready for action. He says he cooked for her, and invites her to eat with him. During the meal, she said that she remembered him from that company dinner, but she didn't know his name. He then introduces himself to her, noticing that this copy he brought to the game had the same memories as the real woman. She was impressed that he could make all of that by himself, electricity, food, shelter, and everything else. He thanks her and asks about her life and how she spent the last month. Then she says that suddenly everyone had vanished from the world, and that he is the only living person that she found during the whole month. He asks what she plans to do now, and she says that haven't planned anything yet. Our protagonist goes for the attack and asks the lady to live there with him, saying that if she gets sick, he can take care of her and have everything she needs right there. That was a bit of a simp move, but considering the actual state of the world they're in, is not like she had a better choice. So she accepts the offer, but warns him that he isn't her type and he shouldn't try doing anything funny. Well, for someone who, for sheer loneliness, was talking to a dummy a few days ago, that was clearly a huge win. So he says that is fine by him. She says she would not take advantage of him or anything, and they can share the work. He said it was a good idea, but she should rest for today because tomorrow they would start to work for real. Even though he doesn't show it, our protagonist had been emotionally broken by this rejection, but their relationship was just starting. And with that, we reached the end of this episode, my friends. If you liked the video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe, because this is only the first episode. There's a lot more coming. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.